You think silence is weakness? Let me tell you something. When you stop calling, stop chasing, stop explaining, that's when his mind starts racing. That's when your absence speaks louder than all your words ever did. Because the moment you choose peace over proving your worth, he feels it. Not in your texts, not in your voice, but in the silence you left behind. Stay right here, because I'm about to break down exactly what goes through a man's mind when you finally go quiet. A man doesn't miss you simply because you were around often or constantly in his space. What he misses is the emotional experience you gave him. It's the memory of how he felt in your presence that sticks with him. When you spoke to him, did he feel understood? When you laughed, did he feel light inside? That emotional imprint, the one he can't quite explain but can't forget, that's what creates the ache of missing someone. It's not about being constantly visible, it's about being memorable. The truth is, physical presence fades fast, but emotional impact lingers much longer. And we often think that to make someone miss us, we must be everywhere, always showing up, always reminding them we care. But real connection doesn't come from overexposure. It's not about chasing, convincing, or proving. It's about being felt deeply when you were there. Did you show up as your authentic self? Did you bring calm to his chaos or reflection to his rush? A man will always miss a woman who showed up as her full self, not the version she thought he wanted, but the woman who was rooted in her truth and radiated confidence. And the most unforgettable women are not the loudest or the most available. They're the ones who were emotionally real. They didn't always agree. They didn't always say what he wanted to hear, but they spoke their truth with kindness and held their own. They brought something genuine into his life. And whether the relationship worked out or not, the emotional stamp they left can't be copied or replaced. You can't fake energy. You can't replicate that sense of depth. What he misses long after it's over is the authenticity of your presence and how rare it was. And men don't miss routine texts or repetitive habits. They miss those intimate moments that felt effortless yet profound, the way you listened with your eyes, the way your silence could say more than words. He remembers the way you challenged him, called him out, believed in him, or made him laugh when he didn't feel like laughing. Those aren't physical traits, they're emotional imprints. They live in his nervous system, in his mind, in his chest. When he least expects it, he'll feel them again. At a stoplight, in a song, in a scent, and wonder, why can't I stop thinking about her? And a man doesn't miss control. He misses the freedom he felt when he was with someone who didn't demand love, but inspired it. There's a big difference between being needed and being felt. Being felt means your energy changed the room, and he noticed. You didn't try to impress him, you just were. You had standards, and that made him step up. You had boundaries, and that made him respect you. And without knowing it, you planted emotional seeds that now bloom in your absence. He didn't see them then, but he feels them now. That's the power of real connection. And if you were always the one trying, always the one checking in, then what he'll miss most might not be you, but your effort. And that's not the same. But if you were calm, centered, and showed up with intentional love, not desperation, he will miss you. He'll miss the one person who didn't try to fix him, but believed in his ability to grow. The woman who wasn't begging to be chosen, but inviting him to choose wisely. That's when missing becomes meaningful. It's no longer about ego. It becomes about loss, the loss of something rare and real. And too many people underestimate the subtle power of presence. You don't need to do backflips to be unforgettable. You need to be real, consistent, and emotionally generous, but not self-abandoning. You need to leave conversations where you didn't betray yourself just to keep the peace. He'll remember those moments. He'll remember that you didn't shrink, that you held your heart open without letting him take it for granted, that you stayed soft without being weak, that you could walk away without losing your kindness. That balance, that's unforgettable. And he'll miss that more than anything physical. And you don't become memorable by being convenient. You become memorable by being impactful. Don't be the woman who tried to fill every gap. Be the woman who left space for him to show up, who didn't overextend, but showed warmth where it was deserved. A man misses the woman who made him feel safe enough to open up, yet challenged enough to stay awake. The one who didn't flatter his ego, but stirred his soul. And when he realizes that he can't find that again with just anyone, that's when the ache of missing turns real. And don't underestimate the power of one genuine conversation. One moment where he felt seen. One time you said something that stayed with him. That's how men fall in love. And that's how they miss someone. Not because you said 100 things, but because you said one thing that mattered. Not because you were always available, but because when you were present, you were truly there. That presence leaves an energy behind that lingers. Even if time passes, even if other people enter the picture, your imprint will still echo in his thoughts, often silently, but powerfully. And a man will miss the version of you that wasn't performing, wasn't competing, wasn't proving anything, but simply being. The most magnetic version of you is the one who loves herself first, who knows that her worth isn't tied to whether he stays or goes. When you live from that place, everything you give becomes more powerful. He didn't know it then. He might not admit it now. But deep down, he feels it. You were different. And that difference, wrapped in your authenticity, is what he'll crave long after you're gone. Missing someone doesn't always mean love disappeared. Sometimes it means there wasn't enough space to realize it was there. We've been taught that love grows through closeness, but the truth is, closeness without pause creates emotional blindness. When someone is always present, we stop noticing their presence. We stop appreciating the warmth because we've never felt the cold. Space introduces contrast. It gives someone the chance to feel the absence and compare it to the comfort they once had. That's why silence can be louder than any conversation. That's why distance can build more desire than constant attention ever could. And people often fear creating distance because they think it will make the other person forget. But when there's real connection, space doesn't erase, it intensifies. When you step back, you give a man the opportunity to lean in. When you stop texting first, he wonders why. When you don't rush to respond, he feels the shift. That shift sparks reflection. It doesn't always mean panic or regret, but it creates space in his mind to ask questions. The moment he notices your absence, he begins to measure your value, not by what you give, but by what he's now missing. And when you're constantly available, there's no curiosity, there's no energy gap to create desire. The emotional scale remains flat. Men, just like women, need time to feel, process, and reflect. But when we crowd every moment, we rob them of that time. Silence creates space for emotions to breathe. It's not manipulation, it's respect. You're allowing both people to feel without pressure. You're not punishing him by pulling back. You're honoring yourself by not always reaching forward. That's when the balance of connection begins to shift. That's when he starts wondering instead of assuming you'll always be there. And there's a certain confidence in distance that speaks volumes. It says, I'm still me even without you. And that energy is magnetic. It's not cold, it's not cruel, it's composed. When you can step back without bitterness, without resentment, you show him what self-respect looks like. You become the woman who doesn't force connection but invites it. And when a man realizes that you're not driven by fear of losing him, but by trust in yourself, it wakes something up in him. It makes him see you differently. It makes him feel your absence not as rejection, but as rare strength. And the more emotional pressure you remove, the more room you create for attraction to build. Men at their core are drawn to what feels free, not forced. When he feels like you can walk away but still care deeply, that's powerful. He starts to ask himself questions he didn't before. Why am I thinking about her more now? Why do I miss the energy she brought? That space you created becomes his mirror. And what he sees in that mirror depends on what you've shown him, not just through words, but through the quiet dignity of your distance. And there's an art to being distant without being disconnected. It's about emotional maturity. You're not ghosting, you're not playing games, you're creating emotional contrast. You're allowing the bond to stretch instead of break. It's the silence between music notes that gives rhythm. It's the pause in conversation that makes the next word meaningful. You are that pause. You are that breath of fresh air in a world full of noise. And when he finally takes that breath, he'll feel the difference. He won't be able to ignore it. It will stay with him, echoing long after your message stopped. And desire thrives in space. Without distance, appreciation becomes dull. Think of your favorite song. If it played all day, every day, it would lose its magic. But when it comes on unexpectedly, it moves you again. That's what your absence can do. It makes your presence feel like a gift. The less he hears from you, the more his mind fills in the blanks. That space becomes fertile ground for longing, not because you're gone, but because when you were there, you mattered. Now he sees it. Now he feels it. Now he wants it back. And when you step away, the energy changes. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning. It's not passive. It's intentional. It says, I'm choosing peace over pressure. I'm choosing myself without needing to explain. That kind of silence is powerful because it creates curiosity. And curiosity is the first step toward missing. When a man doesn't know what's going on in your world anymore, he starts to want back in. Not because you've begged, but because you've paused. That pause is louder than any paragraph you could have sent. And that silence is more powerful than any confession. And a lot of women fear that if they create space, he'll move on. But here's the truth. If a man can forget you during that space, he was never emotionally invested. But if he starts remembering, reflecting, reaching, that's when you know the connection was real. You didn't lose him, you revealed him. The man who cares will come forward. The man who doesn't will fade. And both are gifts. One brings clarity, the other brings closure. Either way, you win. Because space will always show you the truth faster than words ever will. And silence is often misread as weakness, but it's one of the strongest messages you can send. It shows you're not desperate to be seen, you're comfortable being missed. That's a whole different energy. That energy forces him to rethink. It challenges his assumptions. It rewrites the narrative he had in his head that you'd always be there, always waiting, always explaining. But now the silence is telling its own story, and that story is hitting harder than any speech ever could, because he doesn't just hear the silence, he feels it. And that's when missing turns into meaning. Nothing creates emotional gravity like a woman who is focused on herself. not in a selfish way, but in a self-honoring way. When your energy shifts from chasing love to building your own life, everything changes. Men notice the glow you give off when you're not waiting, not hoping, not needing, just living is impossible to ignore. It's the kind of glow that makes someone stop scrolling, stop looking, stop taking you lightly. Because you're not just filling time anymore, you're fulfilling yourself. And that, more than anything else, makes a man start missing your presence before you're even fully gone. And when your world doesn't revolve around him, it gives him a glimpse into a life that's already rich without him. That's powerful, because most people want to be added to, not used to complete someone else. When he sees you chasing your dreams, protecting your peace, growing without updates or explanations, it triggers something real. He begins to wonder how you managed to glow so bright on your own. It's not that you're pushing him away, it's that you're no longer pulling him closer. That shift makes him lean in. That freedom makes you magnetic in ways you never had to force. And there's a difference between a woman who's distracted by her self-worth and one who's deeply rooted in it. When you become the second, your vibe changes. You're no longer emotionally dependent on what he says, what he does, or whether he shows up. You've built a life, a mindset, and an inner peace that doesn't shake just because someone isn't clapping for it. He sees that. And what he sees is rare, because most people seek validation from others, but you've already given it to yourself. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't ask to be seen, it demands to be remembered. And a man may not notice the subtle glow of your self-love at first, but when you're gone, it hits him like a wave. Not because you screamed or slammed the door, but because he realized too late that your silence wasn't sadness, it was strength. Your life didn't collapse without him. It expanded. You didn't stall your journey, you accelerated it. And when a man watches a woman evolve from a distance, he doesn't just miss her, he questions himself. How did I not see this before? Was I the one holding her back? Will she even let me back in? That's when missing becomes humbling. And there's nothing more unforgettable than watching someone who once needed reassurance now thrive in her own power. You were once the woman who overthought every reply, waited on texts, questioned but now you're building, you're not checking your phone, you're checking your goals. That transformation is unforgettable because it's not just physical change. It's spiritual elevation. You stop making him the center of your universe, and in doing so, you found your center. That peace glows louder than attention. And when he senses that peace, he misses you, not just for who you were, but for who you've become. And when a woman becomes fulfilled within herself, she changes the way men interact with her. She's no longer begging to be chosen, she's choosing. She's no longer asking, am I enough? She's quietly deciding, is this enough for me? That kind of shift can't be faked. It's something a man feels on a soul level. And when he realizes she's no longer accessible in the same way, that's when the ache begins. Not because she withheld love, but because she outgrew the place where she once begged for it. That's not rejection. That's evolution. And that's what he'll miss most. And a man starts to miss you when your energy no longer serves him first. It serves you first. That's the reversal. That's the recalibration. Because before, maybe he knew you'd always be there, always answering, always caring, always staying soft, even when it hurt. But now, you've turned inward. You've poured that softness into yourself. You've begun healing the parts of you that once waited for love to validate them. And in that shift, he loses access. Not because you're angry, but because you're whole. And men don't miss what's always available. They miss what elevated without needing them. And it's not about making him jealous. It's about making yourself proud. When you stop performing for his attention, you start performing for your purpose. When your day isn't dictated by his energy, but by your own priorities, you become a different woman. A woman whose time isn't just spent, it's invested. And men can feel when you're no longer emotionally orbiting them. That gravitational pull they once felt, now it belongs to your passion, your peace, your growth. And ironically, the moment your energy returns to you, he starts chasing the warmth he didn't appreciate when it was his. And men miss the woman who shows them what emotional self-sufficiency looks like. The one who doesn't demand love but attracts it through her calm confidence. The one who isn't reactive, who doesn't need to prove her worth, who knows that walking away isn't loss. It's leadership. That kind of energy is rare. It stands out in a world full of noise. Because you didn't try to make him miss you. You just stopped overextending. And in the quiet that followed, he found a mirror. One that reflected the kind of woman he may never experience again if he doesn't step up. And you become unforgettable, not when you demand his attention, but when you withdraw yours and use it to fuel yourself. Your glow up isn't always about new clothes or new lips. It's about new boundaries, new vision, new peace. You don't announce your transformation. You let it speak for itself. And when he notices, it won't be because you shouted. It'll be because your silence become radiant, because your happiness became obvious, because your presence became felt more after you walked away than it ever was when you were always available. That's the power of a woman who chooses herself. Sometimes the loudest message is no message at all. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood, you give him space to feel your absence, not your words. Silence removes the noise, the pressure, the constant availability. It forces him to sit with himself and notice what's missing. And often what's missing isn't just your presence, it's the peace, the support, the energy you brought without needing credit. When you go quiet, you break the cycle of always being the emotional anchor. You no longer remind him of your value. Instead, he must discover it on his own. And men often respond to silence in stages. At first, he may feel relief, freedom from expectations, from accountability, from the emotional weight of your connection. But that phase is short-lived, because as days pass and your silence lingers, something shifts. He begins to wonder where you went emotionally, not just physically, but in spirit. The silence he once welcomed starts to echo in places he didn't expect, in his routine, in the middle of the night, in between meaningless conversations. That's when he realizes your voice wasn't noise, it was grounding. Your presence wasn't pressure, it was peace. And when you pull back without explanation, it creates a psychological vacuum. He starts to fill that silence with questions. Did I do something wrong? Is she gone for good? Was she always this strong? That's the power of quiet detachment. You no longer feed his ego. You no longer affirm his assumptions. And now he's left to confront the truth. You're no longer emotionally invested in convincing him to choose you. That space becomes the mirror he can't avoid. He may try to distract himself, to brush it off, but the silence whispers louder with time, and those whispers become internal storms. And there's a kind of silence that isn't about anger, it's about clarity. It says, I've said everything I needed to say, and now I choose peace. That kind of stillness is powerful because it's not reactive. It doesn't chase It doesn't threaten, it simply is. And that presence in absence, it lingers. It wraps around him in the most unexpected moments. When he checks his phone and sees nothing. When he laughs and realizes no one's there to share it. When he wakes up and doesn't feel that emotional tether anymore. That's when he feels the cost of your silence. And men aren't always quick to process emotional loss, but silence accelerates awareness. It shortens the delay between taking you for granted and realizing your worth. Because your words can be ignored, argued with, or dismissed. But your silence, it can't be debated. It can't be misquoted. It sits with him. It grows over time. And with each passing day, it gains weight. Until one morning, he realizes that he's not just missing a woman, he's missing the one who didn't beg, the one who walked away gracefully, the one who stayed silent and in doing so spoke volumes. And when you stop explaining, you regain power. Every time you justify your worth, you hand him control over how it's measured. But silence refuses to participate in that exchange. It says, you already know who I am. Whether you see it or not is no longer my responsibility. That's what rattles him, because now he has to sit with his own interpretation of you, without your influence, without your voice softening the truth. And what he sees might hurt, not because you were wrong for him, but because you were right and he wasn't ready for it. And we live in a world that confuses presence with attention. But emotional presence is different. It's about energy, intention, connection. When you remove that energy from someone's life, it doesn't go unnoticed. Even if he acts unaffected, even if he distracts himself, the withdrawal of your emotional presence creates a silent disruption. It shifts the energy, and slowly he realizes the difference between someone who's just around and someone who sees him. Now you've turned inward, and in the quiet that follows, he starts to feel the real loss, your attention, your care, your essence. And silence creates contrast. It makes him realize how much you actually gave. It makes the small moments feel large. The ordinary things, your laughter, your check-ins, your perspective, suddenly feel extraordinary in their absence. He replays conversations, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. He revisits memories, not because he misses the past, but because he's searching for the piece of himself he felt most alive with. That's what silence does. It turns volume down on the world and turns the volume up on memory. And what he hears in that quiet replay, that's when regret starts knocking. And going silent isn't about winning. It's about removing yourself from a space that no longer values your voice. You're not punishing, you're protecting. You're stepping away from a pattern that drained you, and in that choice, you create emotional freedom. He now has to choose. Stay in the echo of what you once gave, or rise and match the depth you brought. But that choice is his alone. You're no longer leading him to the answer. You're no longer teaching him how to treat you. You've gone quiet. And that silence, it's the test, not of love, but of awareness. And what he does in your silence tells you everything you need to know. If he reaches out, reflects, and shows growth, that's effort. If he blames, avoids, or stays distant, that's closure. Either way, your silence brings truth. It brings resolution without argument, clarity without conflict. It draws a line without words. And when you hold that silence, not as a tactic, but as a truth, you reclaim your worth. You become the calm after the storm. The woman who doesn't need noise to be heard. The woman who doesn't beg to be seen. Because now you see yourself more clearly than ever. And let me know if you'd like to turn all 4 keynotes into a complete speech, video script, or short form content series.